Ricky Cage, three-time Grammy Award winner. How does it feel? Do you like get it every so often that whoever's saying your name says, Ricky Cage, three-time Grammy Award winner?
Yeah, of course. It's first of all, it's a huge honor for me to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It is a surreal feeling for sure because growing up in Bangalore, making independent music, making non-mainstream music, it always felt like an unattainable dream or a dream that you could not even think about, you know, because you'd watch the Grammys on television and that was the end of it. But then actually winning my first Grammy Award when I was 33 years old, and you know, and then after that winning another two more, it's just an amazing feeling to represent India on such a large stage, especially creating Indian music.
So lots of young musicians out there in the crowd as well. What were the first 33 years like before you won your Grammy? We'd like to know more about that. How did music start? What were the challenges faced?
Okay, that is quite a long story, but I'll try to encapsulate it into as short a thing as possible. So while growing up, I was always two things. I was an environmentalist and I was a musician. Two pillars that pretty much dictated my whole life and all of my life decisions. So while my classmates and my siblings and my friends were fascinated by television, by cartoons, by video games, for me, my ears were always more important than my eyes. So the center of my universe was always my music system. My father had this huge music collection. I would listen to music all day long. And my father did not just have the hits of that particular era, but he also had a lot of obscure music and a lot of cultural forms of music from different parts of the world. So a lot of my education happened through listening to all of that music that my father had. And, and then later on, I also fell in love with nature, and my falling in love with nature also had a lot to do with music. And then I realized that music and nature is one and the same, because at the end of the day, how did music start? Music started off as sounds from nature. You know, sounds of the birds, sounds of the animals, sounds of the wind, sounds of the water drops. And then we humans started imitating those sounds. Then we started pulling objects from nature to make musical instruments like bamboo flutes and boxes of seeds and animal skin as percussion instruments. And it's only for the last 1 or 2,000 years that music has actually become academic with notes and scales and rags and things like that. But music and nature has always been one and the same. Then, of course, I started off a professional musical career, and my musical career was more commercial. I was doing a whole lot of ads for...
What is the kind of... Because nowadays you're known for your music, which is closely connected to nature, environment. But to earn a living, what were the commercial jingles and commercial stuff that you did?
No, I did a lot of them. When I started off my musical career, I think in about 1998, all the way for about 13 years during my commercial musical career, I did more than 3,500 commercials. So I did commercial for pretty much every brand that you can imagine and their competitor, and in different parts of the world. And after doing this for so many years, it sort of struck me that these big brands have understood the power of music, so much so that they're ready to spend a few $1,000s on me to actually create a piece of music for them to sell something, because they're always trying to sell something. And not only that, they're ready to spend a few $1 million to actually air this music on television and radio. So they understood that music is a very powerful language for communication and for them to sell something, but it's a very powerful language for communication, and not only that, a very powerful tool to retain that communication deep in the consciousness of, of the listener. So that is when I realized that I need to harness the power of music, because I feel so strongly about so many things, whether it's social impact or whether it's the environment or climate change. So I need to harness the power of music, to make this world a better place. And that's what started off a new journey of mine.
So did you go around telling people about the jingles that you made after you became famous, or is it the other way around? Did those guys who got those jingles made from you now label it as composed by Ricky Cage, three-time Grammy Award winner?
No, of course, once I won my first Grammy Award, a whole lot of brands started tweeting that, that our commercial was, created by a Grammy Award winner. So that obviously happened. But nevertheless, it's not something to feel bad about. It was something that I felt proud about, yeah.
So here we are at ABP Network's Southern Rising, and we have three-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage. For those of you who just joined in, I don't know why you were late, but anyway, lots of questions about your connection between and music, environment, how do you connect the two? What's the connection? Which one is the inspiration for?
So I guess for me, I'm always inspired by nature in my music right now, because previously during my commercial musical career, the way I would make music is that somebody would come to me with a brief and I would create music based on that brief and they would pay me money for that. But right now my career has changed, where whenever I feel inspired, I make music based on that. If I feel inspired by nature, I make music on that. If I feel inspired to communicate about human and animal conflict, I'll make music on that. If I feel inspired to communicate about climate action, then I will create music on that. So it's all based on how I'm inspired by it. And when it comes to nature itself and celebrating nature, I've always felt that there are two ways to do that, to go about that when it comes to music. Uh, how I compare it to is like taking a picture of somebody or making a painting or a portrait of someone. So when you take a picture of someone, then what happens is that based on the lighting conditions and based on the surroundings, you get a verbatim representation of what is going on at that particular point of time on a photographic plate. Whereas if you make a painting of someone, then you can get a little bit of the soul of the person into your painting, because it's an interpretation of the person you're making a portrait of. It's the same with me about nature. Rather than recording sounds of nature and rather than recording animal sounds and incorporating that into my music, I like to paint my music. I like to to write music for, let's say, a flute, and get the flute to interpret what I felt about nature, or get an orchestra or a string section to interpret what I feel about nature, or get a guitar to interpret what I feel about nature. So that is the way that I make my music. I don't actually record sounds of nature, but what I do is that I interpret the sounds of nature through musical instruments, because that's what I love doing.
Right. I'd like to touch upon the fact that your parents are from North India, and yet you call yourself a proud South Indian. You're from the southern states. That's what you say. You can understand a few languages. How does that work at home and now?
So of course, I was actually born in the USA. I was there for about 6 years. My father is a doctor, and he was a doctor there in North Carolina. And when I was 6 years old, that's when my family decided that we will move to India, the whole family, because my parents wanted to bring me up and my brother up in India. So my father and mother traveled the length and breadth of India, and then they chose South India. They chose in particular Bangalore. But the reason why they chose Bangalore was that Bangalore was the only city in the whole of India where we did not have any relatives. So that is so that is the reason why they chose Bangalore. So Bangalore is a city where I grew up. Everything that I am is due to Bangalore and South India. So that's why I always say that my father is from Rajasthan, my mom is from Punjab, but I am a proud Kannadiga.
And here you are at the Southern Rising Summit. Okay, there was one meeting with the Prime Minister that actually changed your life and made commercial Ricky Cage into an environmentalist Ricky Cage. We'd like to know about that.
Sure. So after I won my first Grammy Award in 2015 for my album Winds of Samsara, I was invited by the Honorable Prime Minister for a quick meeting. I was told that it's going to be a quick 5-minute photo op meeting. And of course, for that itself, I was extremely grateful, because you're with a population of 1.4 billion people, you're getting to meet the head of your state. So I went for the meeting, and it ended up being an hour-long discussion, because the Honorable Prime Minister got to know about my work in the environment and how passionate I was as an environmentalist, my work with the United Nations. So it ended up becoming an almost hour-long discussion. And during that discussion, the Honorable Prime Minister saw my passion for the environment, and then he said that, why don't you dedicate your life to this? And he encouraged me to stop all forms of commercial music and just focus entirely on, environmental consciousness and, and creating social impact around those areas. So I remember leaving the Prime Minister's office and thinking very strongly to myself that this is the push that I needed, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. So since then, every single piece of music that I've ever made and will ever make till the day I die is going to be about positive social impact and about, in my own tiny, small capacity, to make this world a better place through music.
Well, more power to you, Ricky.
So that is why, I do not do film music and I do not do pop music, because this is my life now.
I was going to come to that question about film music, but since he's preempted it, Go ahead. Why don't you do Bollywood music? Why is Bollywood and why are the movies being deprived of Ricky Cage?
So there are various reasons. Now, when you look at Bollywood music or you look at film music in general, uh, whenever a singer from the film industries across India, whenever a singer or a composer performs in a Jersey or a New York or a Moscow or a or a Berlin or anywhere, they're able to fill up an entire stadium. They're able to get a large audience, but every single person in that audience is a member of the Indian diaspora, except for a few exceptions. The film industries and Bollywood, in my opinion, have not actually broken cultural barriers. There are a few songs that have, but by and large, they haven't broken cultural barriers. They're just catering to the Indian audiences everywhere, which is not a bad thing. It's a great thing because with a large audience, if you're just catering to our audience, that's good enough. But for me, what happened was that when I was quite young, when I was about 19, I think, I had watched a concert of Pandit Ravi Shankar, and this was in the Bay Area in America. And I was very shocked that, he was playing pure Indian classical music, not even fusion for that concert. It was pure Indian classical music. And the demographic of the people within the auditorium was very representative of the demographic of the city that he was playing in. That city had probably an 80% Caucasian population. There was an 80% Caucasian population in the auditorium, a 5% Asian population, 5% Asians in the audience. Because this gentleman playing his pure Indian classical music, he was breaking cultural barriers and he was exposing people who were normally not exposed to Indian music. And he was a flag bearer of Indian music everywhere in the world. And that's what I called him. And then when I saw that concert, I decided that this is what I want to do with my life. I want to break cultural barriers. Now, I explained to you about how Pandit Ravi Shankar has broken culture barriers and he lived abroad and he was creating music abroad. Now, so I coined something known as the Ravi Shankar syndrome in India. Okay, now what is the Ravi Shankar syndrome? Now, everybody knows who Pandit Ravi Shankar was, right? What is the instrument that Pandit Ravi Shankar played? Shout out, what's the instrument that Pandit Ravi Shankar played? Correct. The biggest civilian honor that he won, the Bharat Ratna. What's his daughter's name? Somebody shout out. Perfect. The other daughter's name? Nora Jones, correct. Can anybody name one album of Pandit Ravi Shankar? One album. He's done more than 60 albums. Name one album.
He's done Bollywood as well.
Yeah, or forget about his albums. Name one song of his. Nobody can in India. But because we know him as a personality, but we don't know his music. And that is what Bollywood and the film industries have done. That they've sort of like created a false identity of our music. When I tell people I'm a composer, the first question they ask me is which film? Because that is how deeply integrated our film industry is with our music. And we need to change that, and slowly that is happening.
So, trivia alert, Pandit Ravi Shankar gave the music for the movie Gandhi, the Richard Attenborough movie.
True.
And in case you like his Bollywood music, that's what you're going to listen to.
But that was a British movie.
Yes. Since you spoke about stadiums right now, you were generally getting a lot of traction on social media on Trevor Noah's concert. So I'll give you a background gist of it. The concert was cancelled, and Ricky's comment was Trevor should have done a sound check himself. What happened?
The less said about that, the better. So Trevor Noah is...
No, we want to know, man.
So Trevor Noah, obviously, he's a very famous and a very talented comic actor. He's a comedian. He used to be on The Daily Show. So he had done this tour of Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai. So for the Bangalore show, he came up on stage and then he said that the sound is not good or something like that. And then he walked off stage and he canceled both his shows in Bangalore. And he pretty much blamed India in his comments and in his rant about, why he did not do the two concerts. So that did not sit well with me, because being a musician, whenever I do, or rather being a performer, whenever I do concerts, no matter what the venue, no matter what the size of the audience, even if it's an audience of 50 or if it's an audience of 100,000, I make it a point that I go prior to the event and I always do a sound check. And I make sure that the audience experience is absolutely amazing, or at least as amazing as it can get based on the venue. But that is a responsibility that I do not move out from. That is extremely important. Whereas in this case, Trevor Noah, the first time he actually went on stage was when he went on stage for the performance. So for him, it's all right if you don't do your sound check, it's all right if you're busy. But then if you do not do your sound check and if you do not actually test the equipment yourself, then you do not have the right to blame an organizer. And you do not have, and especially you do not have the right to blame an entire country, which has hosted so many comedians and has hosted so many big musical acts from all over the world. So you do not have the rights to actually do that because you have moved away from your own responsibility. So that's what I tweeted about, and I think I basically. And a lot of people agreed with me on that. That you cannot just blame a country, you cannot blame a city for having a bad show when ensuring that that show was successful is your responsibility.
I fully agree with him. Even before we came on stage, he did a full sound check. But coming back to your music, so music, nature, you travel a lot. What are the places that you've traveled to make music? As in, does it come naturally or you just go there with your instruments and how does it work?
So I'll give you an example.
Huh.
So when it comes to climate change, all of us know that climate change is the biggest existential threat we've ever faced as a human species. Now, I did an album in 2015, an album called Shanti Samsara. It was my epic album for environmental consciousness, featured 500 musicians from over 40 countries. Wherever in the world, in every corner of the globe, I could find a musician who felt as strongly as I did about climate action. I basically collaborated with them. So this album was launched by our Honorable Prime Minister and the then French President in 2015 at the Paris Climate Change Conference, which happened in December in 2015. Now, what is the Paris Climate Change Conference? It was the biggest conference of nations in the history of our planet. 195 presidents and prime ministers coming together under one roof to understand what is this climate change, what can we do in terms of climate action, how do we mitigate the effects of climate change and build a better future for our future generations. So during this climate change conference, every single world leader had to go up on stage and give a presentation for about 10 or 15 minutes. One world leader who absolutely caught my attention was President Anote Tong of the island nation of Kiribati. Now, Kiribati is a Pacific island nation, as I mentioned. This gentleman, the president of Kiribati, he went up on stage and he gave a 30-second presentation. All that he said when he went up on stage was that all you 195 countries present here, please pass a resolution that ensures that my people of Kiribati stay above the water. Now, that was a very powerful statement. So then I studied about Kiribati, realized that it used to be 33 inhabited islands. Now it's 21 inhabited islands because most of the islands are going underwater and they are predicted to be the first country in the world that's going to go completely underwater due to climate change. So I went to Kiribati, spent 3 weeks over there, spent a lot of time with their president. And the president, told me that, we are low-lying islands, so we are suffering the consequences of your actions. Because if all of our countries, like developed nations and developing nations, if we could build domes around our borders and keep our carbon emissions and pollution within our own borders, then countries like Kiribati have nothing to worry about. But our carbon emissions spread around the world. It's a very thin atmosphere. It's only one atmosphere because of this global temperatures rise, polar ice caps melt, ocean levels rise. And because Kiribati are very low-lying islands, they are the first to go underwater and they are suffering the consequences of our actions. That is what inspired me to make music. So I made music with their local population, getting their cultural influences, with their people, with their president. And that is what inspired me to make a song. And that song brought about a lot of change because I performed that song 3 times now at the United Nations General Assembly, at the United Nations headquarters in New York and in Geneva. And this started the conversation among world leaders because if you make an emotional plea through the language of arts and music to world leaders, then basically you're reaching their hearts and their souls. And that is what inspires them to bring about change. And that's what happened with this song. And now the whole world talks about Kiribati. Previously, nobody had even heard of their country when their president had gone up on stage. Now the whole world talks about Kiribati. And they use Kiribati as a very strong example to showcase that climate change is not some vague phenomenon that may or may not happen in the future. Climate change is real and there are current victims of climate change. And our actions sitting down over here are having disastrous consequences on people on the other side of the world. So that is what I tried to convey through music, and in some way I was successful doing that.
Let's just converge the lens a little bit and focus more on India. Do you think we as Indians are concerned about the climate, or is the rest of the world more concerned? Where do we rate on that scale? And what have been your efforts to probably bring about the change if so required?
I think when it comes to the environment and when it comes to climate change, I think India is making very, very large strides. I think the concern in India, and I travel all over the world, the concern in India is much larger than anywhere else in the world, even though we are actually not at fault when it comes to climate change. We are developing very responsibly, in my opinion, at least far more responsibly than the West has developed since the industrial age. And like if you look at various things, you look at the way that we, like the Solar Alliance, for example, what our government has come up with, I thought that was quite path-breaking of creating an alliance of nations, which have a tropical climate so that we can generate renewable energy for the entire global South. If you look at the Prime Minister's Life Mission, I think that is quite a game changer because I've always believed that the biggest threat to us as a human species, with all the problems that we face when it comes to the environment, is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference. We're always talking about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that's not because we're evil people, it's simply because we haven't empowered ourselves to believe that the small, tiny, incremental changes that we can make within our own lives actually matter. We always
How have you inspired people in India to probably, create a better world for us?
So it's through my music. Of course, I've not performed in Chennai often enough, but if you come to any of my concerts, that's what it is all about. It's all about individual action. It's all about how can I make a difference? What can I do? So my concerts are very energetic. They're very entertaining, but at the same time, it gives you food for thought. That when you go back home, you're constantly thinking about how can I make a difference rather than how can I force somebody else to bring about change. So that's what I try to do. Because the thing is that everybody at some level is aware of all the problems that we face. Maybe not at an analytical level, maybe not at a scientific level, but everybody knows that there's something known as climate change, that there is a plastics pollution, there's air pollution. But so the golden question is not how do we create awareness, the golden question is how do we convert this awareness of problems, how do we convert that to actually taking concrete steps and action within our own lives? Because we feel that if I stop using single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or if I reduce my use of fossil fuels, what difference will it make? So that's what I try to show through my music, through the emotional language of music. As I mentioned, reach the hearts and souls of people. And that is what will create mere awareness of problems into actually taking concrete steps within our own lives and taking action.
For those of you just joined in, welcome again to ABP Network's Southern Rising, and we have Ricky Cage here with us. You also go around with a recorder and you record sounds from various parts of the country. Tell us something about that. And how do you make music out of that?
So that is basically collaborating with musicians, because we all know about Indian classical forms of music, that is Hindustani classical and Carnatic classical. But India has got far more traditional forms of music across India, and these are the tribal and folk forms of music. Especially when it comes to the tribal musicians, I've been very fascinated by the farmer tribal musicians. So I travel very often to Odisha and and collaborate with the tribal farmers over there. They've got these songs that have been passed down from generation to generation. These songs have been passed down orally from generation to generation. So there is no actual written script for these songs. So the only way to learn these songs is to learn it from a tribal musician. And the best part about these songs is that these songs talk about coexistence. These songs talk about the good things of life, of harvest, about how to live within the delicate balance of nature. So they're just beautiful things to learn from, not just the music, but the thematic elements of these songs. Like, for example, I was in a millet field in Koraput, and one of the farmers was singing a song, and I got the song translated, and it said that, the harvest of millet is very similar to me actually giving birth. So that is the kind of analogies that they have, and that's the kind of love that they have for nature and and good food and a super crop like millet. So this is the kind of songs that I love recording. Then also in North Karnataka, also in the Northeast. Also, I've collaborated extensively with the Baul musicians in Bengal because these songs and these forms of music are at the threat of extinction because a lot of the people who practice these forms of music have these songs, as I mentioned, passed down orally, and most of them are not continuing the practice. So I think a few of us need to actually document these songs so that these songs live on forever and the whole world learns from these songs. Because the thematic elements, I think, apply to the whole world. And if we only follow these ancient practices and these ancient ideas, then climate change and all of these problems of species extinction and deforestation will be a thing of the past.
Well, let's hope that happens. Talking more about music, and since we are at the Southern Rising Summit, which are the musicians from this part of the country that you actually listen to and make it a point to listen to anything new that they've made from the southern states? Which of them?
Oh, there are lots of them actually, especially the classical musicians. Like Jayanti Kumresh, I'm a huge fan of hers. With one Viku Vinayakram, and and of course when it comes to the film music, like Selva Ganesh also a huge fan of his. Then when it comes to there are so many I can name actually, like like Bombay Jayashree, massive fan of hers, and there's so many musicians that I can name actually. And then of course, the overarching person when it comes to film music, when it comes to all sorts of music, is of course A.R. Rahman, a very good friend of mine. And the reason why I'm bringing him up over here is that he has pretty much changed the face of Indian music for generations, and if I may say so, the thing about A.R. Rahman is that every single musician in India after him has been inspired by him in some way or the other. And whether it's a musician or whether it's a singer, including me. And because that is the kind of footprint that he's had on the musical landscape in India. And if anybody says that they haven't been inspired in any way by A.R. Rahman and that is the huge footprint that he's had on Indian music, and I'm very fortunate to have him as a friend. So that's what. So basically, I feel that, and then there are, of course, my band has got completely. The band that I travel with all over the world, it's completely musicians from South India. Varijashri Venugopal, Arun Kumar on drums. We've got Giridhar Udappa on khatam. These are the musicians who travel with me everywhere and perform with me. So I've got great respect for the South Indian forms of music.
So was it A.R. Rahman making Vande Mataram and then you decided to make the national anthem? So Ricky has done a version of the national anthem, which has got quite a lot of positive acclaim. Tell us something. What was it, A.R. Rahman?
No, so the thing is that the national anthem of India was the first piece of music that I ever learned or even listened to as a child. Even before I listened to any nursery rhymes or lullabies, the national anthem was the first piece of music that I ever listened to. And as I mentioned, when I started off my music, on music, I basically, was self-taught, and the first piece of music that I learned on the keyboard was the Indian national anthem. And so the Indian national anthem is something that is within my blood, and in every part of my being. So I've done various versions of the Indian national anthem while I was growing up. But then this year I thought, why not do an epic version of it? And I've performed and I've collaborated with symphony orchestras all over the world, and some of the best symphony orchestras. And one thing that I've always felt when I collaborate with a symphony orchestra and when I watch a symphony orchestra performing is that, what is a symphony orchestra? It's got all of these various instruments. It's got violins, which is a soft instrument. Then you've got a timpani, which is a very loud instrument. And then you've got a harp, which is a soft instrument, a bassoon, which is a really loud instrument. You've got a piano, which can be loud and soft. So you've got all of these various instruments, which have got its own personalities. And a violin is not trying to be a timpani is not trying to be a harp is not trying to be a bassoon. Everybody, all these instruments are maintaining their own unique personality, but yet when all of them play together, they somehow sound amazing together. And that is what our country is all about.
Coexistence.
It's about coexistence, and it's about maintaining your own ideology, maintaining your own philosophy, but somehow working together in beautiful harmony. So that is why I wanted to do an orchestral version of our Indian national anthem. And I thought, why not get the best orchestra in the world, that is the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and a 100-member orchestra. So I conducted them at Abbey Road Studios, recorded this version, and of course there was a little subtext where, after ruling us for 200 years, the best British orchestra performing our Indian national anthem conducted by an Indian composer, so that there was a little bit of subtext over there. And of course, when the piece came out this Independence Day, it was tweeted by our Honorable Prime Minister of India and various heads of state all over the world, and it became quite successful. And I was very happy that it was very well appreciated, and people appreciated that this is what I wanted to portray India as being a lot of unity and diversity, and India is just one big orchestra, with people of different ideologies, people of different diverse people, diverse languages, diverse culinary tastes and thoughts and philosophies, religions, but somehow coming together beautifully as one nation.
And while we were walking, the national anthem was playing. He stopped immediately. So did all of us, but you could see the respect for the national anthem there. It's been wonderful talking to you, learning more about music linked to nature and, like you said, coexistence. If they can all, come together, live peacefully, and be one with the forest and nature. I mean, that's what you've taught us. That's what I think all of us have learned from this session with you. 3-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage with us on ABP Network's Southern Rising. Thank you so much.
Thank you, an absolute honor. Thank you so much.